Okay, I say connecting.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to our evening with author Doug Engstrom. And we're really excited to be able to host this tonight. It's the beauty of having a virtual event is even when the weather is crazy, we can still host it from the safety and the comfort of our own homes. Maybe this will be the thing from now on, right, Doug? Like, it's the middle of the winter in the Midwest and not have to worry about bad weather, have them virtually. So everybody that doesn't know me, my name is Terry, and I am one of the co-owners and the operations manager at Swamp Fox Bookstore, an independent bookstore in Marion, Iowa. And we are excited tonight to have author Doug Engstrom with us to talk about his book, Corporate Gunslinger. And Doug has been a farmer's son, a U.S. Air Force officer, a technical writer, a computer support specialist, and a business analyst, as well as being a writer of speculative fiction. He lives near Des Moines, Iowa, with his wife, Catherine. And I met Doug at Icon, 2 years ago now, because we didn't have it here. And let me know that his book was coming out, and I very excitedly was eager for it to arrive, and had the opportunity to actually listen to the book last week during a road trip with my husband, who, as soon as we didn't finish it on our road trip, as soon as we got home, he got online and he bought the ebook to finish reading it. So he really enjoyed it. So we're excited to have you tonight, Doug.
Happy to be here.
Great. Well, I just want to let everybody know that has joined the event. On the right-hand side of your screen, there's the ability to chat. So if you want to chime in and say hi to us, let us know where you're from. It looks like we have 11 people online and a few people watching on Facebook. So hi, people on Facebook. And you can chat. If you have questions, you can ask them, and there's a questions button, and we'll get to those at the end. I've got a few questions for Doug, and we'll go through those, and I'll take a look to see what other people are asking as well. So, Doug, I know.
Terry, can the people on Facebook ask questions too, or is that strictly for the people?
I think I should be able to see. Hopefully, I'll be able to see what questions they've asked. Okay. So, we'll see. This is the first time I've done a Facebook Live simultaneous with one of these, so we'll see how fancy I can get watching things. So yeah, we'll keep an eye out on that on Facebook too. So, Doug, I know that things have been. You recently had a life change. You have made the decision to become a full-time author. You were balancing writing a book while working a full-time job, correct?
Not balancing particularly well, but that is what I was doing, yes.
So what was that decision like to become a full-time author, and what do you do with all your time now? When you're not on Twitter tweeting me.
Well, one of the things I'm going to say up front, and that's for kind of the benefit of writers in the audience, is that my wife's job and investment income are doing kind of the heavy financial lifting here, and I think that's kind of an important disclosure thing for people who are writing full time, is to say, for the benefit of people who are not, this is what makes this possible for me. Because in many cases, I would wager most, the answer is not writing income. And that's just a reality of the field. It's not something people should have to feel bad about or feel like they're, not getting what other people are getting. But that aside, working mornings, I have kind of tried to slot my writing into where the day job used to be. And so the aspiration anyway is kind of get up, eat breakfast, look at the schedule, make sure there's no burning fires in the inbox. I'm good for usually somewhere around 4 to 6 hour burst of writing, somewhere in there. Knock off for lunch, and then after lunch is when a lot of the things like maintaining those social media accounts, writing my agent. Doing publicity stuff, writing things for, guest blogs or my blog or all that kind of stuff is all kind of happens in the afternoon. And then sometime around 5 o'clock-ish, I start to work on dinner. And
so you're in charge of cooking. What do you like? What's one of your favorite dishes to cook?
yeah, I'm still kind of feeling my way around that, finding things. Tonight we had pancakes. We had blueberry pancakes. Those were fun.
Brenner, my favorite.
And but haven't haven't really gotten to the point where I have a favorite recipe yet. That'll come, I think.
Awesome. So tell us a little bit about your writing process. It sounds like you have a pretty good schedule in the day. Like how much time do you spend researching, and this is an industry term, so I'll explain to everybody. Are you a pantser, so you write by the seat of your pants, or are you a plotter where you like to outline things, or are you kind of in the middle?
Well, I think that's that whole plotter pantster thing. I think that's really kind of a continuum, and I am well toward the plotter end of the continuum. I have experimented with writing with just kind of a minimal outline. That was several years ago at NaNoWriMo. I tried that and created. Ironically, it was one of the times I think I won NaNoWriMo, but I had 50,000 words down, of which 5,000 may someday be usable. And kind of decided that, okay, there are people who can do this, but I'm not one of them. And so I tend to start with first kind of a very high level outline, and then work my way down to scene by scene. And it's kind of a big spreadsheet. It kind of describes, okay, this is what happens in each scene. This is why that scene is there. This is the role it fills in the I use a methodology called the story grid to kind of guide my work. Now, that said, I treat that outline a lot more like a project plan than a blueprint. Anybody who's been on a project knows project plans are just kind of aspirational, and this is where we think we're going at any given moment. But you do, things will happen. You do get in there and make changes and discover things. And within some of those scenes, some of them when I start out are very, very clear. This is what's going to happen. This is what it's going to do. This is what it's going to smell like. It's a matter of just writing it down. There is, in the project I'm working on right now, one scene where I know these characters enter. They're in this space. And then there's literally brackets that say something happens.
The TK, the 2
And so I am proceeding on faith that by the time I get to that scene, I will have written into the character and the story enough that I know what that something happens needs, will actually be.
So you don't necessarily stop when you come to those. You just keep writing through it and just make a note to come back to it in the revision process, or something strikes you later as you're writing.
Right. And one of the other nice things about an outline is you don't have to write sequentially. You can, if you show up one morning and feel like, wow, I really know what this scene that's 6 scenes down from where I left off. I really feel like I know what that's going to be today. I just write that thing. And then come back to it. I do a lot of revision. My revision is very heavy, and not only with me, but Kathy reads and gives me feedback on everything right away. And then I'm part of a couple of critique groups, and they see stuff, and my agent sees everything. And she's an editorial agent, and so she always has really good suggestions that come back. But
so your wife is your first reader, essentially.
Yes, she is. She is.
So she gives you the thumbs up or thumbs down.
Yeah, and and it's very good at saying, this is confusing. This is, I don't really understand where you're going here. Or, very occasionally, no.
I heard an interview with John Grisham a couple of years ago on NPR where he was saying that when he comes up with a new idea for a book, he goes and pitches it to his wife, and he has 30 seconds to pitch that book, and she gives him a thumbs up or thumbs down as whether he should move forward with that idea. I'm like, that's more intense than the pitching process for pitching a whole novel. I think. Yeah. 30 seconds, yay or nay. That's pretty intense.
Well, that would suggest that it works for him.
Yes, it does. It might. I mean, there's all different ways to write. So, what inspires you to write the most? Where do your ideas come from? I have a feeling. I mean, we'll get into talking about corporate gunslinger just a little bit. There's definitely some threads there that are related to what's happening in our world right now. But overall, where do your ideas come from, and how do you stay in that? Once you get an idea, how do you stay with that idea?
I will read about, a lot of it is just kind of, research and composting and thinking a lot. Like I said, some of those scenes when I start are very clear. And those are the ones that I've usually thought about a great deal. They were kind of, and I'll have bits and pieces of things I get that, some things that start out, this seems like very clearly should be part of the book, ultimately get cut. That happens. And as far as, just sheer inspiration to write, I was originally a journalist. My undergraduate degree is in journalism, and, deadlines are spectacular. Deadlines do great. One of the things I like about traditional publishing.
Yes, you have that deadline. You have to have the draft or your manuscript to me by X date. So,
right.
So let's talk a little bit about Corporate Gunslinger. This is your first traditionally published novel. Is it your first novel you've ever published? I don't know your publishing history, I guess, beyond that, I guess.
Well, I've had some short stories. I did have a ebook only novella. I've had some. So I've have done a short, some things kind of like that. But this is my first novel length work. And people will say, generally you have to write 2 to 6 novels before you have a publication one. And but I did write this one like 5 times. I sometimes.
So how long did it take you to do those 5 drafts, essentially, or those 5 different versions of it?
When we talked about that, I actually went and looked it up. The oldest pre-work that I have on it is from April of 2013.
Wow.
That's when the very oldest pieces that where I was thinking about Corporate Gunslinger kind of came from. Originally, I had this idea for a book that I called Paid Time. And it was the same idea as Studs Terkel's Working, or a little newer turn on that from, I think, sometime in the 90s called Gig, which is going out and interviewing people about their jobs. And my idea for Paid Time was, well, the science fictional twist on this is I'm going to do that, but I'm going to do that for people that are, middle of the 21st century, mid to late 21st century, and that'll be kind of cool. Anyway, and one of and so this takes the form of a bunch of little vignettes, and one of those vignettes was with a corporate gunfighter. And as I was thinking about that, originally when I was thinking about having a gunfighter, of course, and particularly a gunfighter near the end of their career, you're thinking about Shane, you're thinking about Clint Eastwood's character in The Unforgiven, old grizzled guy. But, that has been done. And so I kind of took the idea of Sean Coyne, who's the story grid guy, says, your first idea is always bad, because it's derivative, keep pushing it and pushing it and pushing it. And somewhere about, 5 iterations out, I decided that, no, my gunfighter is a woman in her late 20s with an MFA. And that kind of became the foundation for that interview. And I worked with that idea. I did probably a year's worth of other stuff in there when it was kind of fallowing. I signed with my agent in April of 2017. And so that was actually, she saw what was essentially the second really major rewrite when I had earlier gone out and sent it to beta readers. I did something which I recommend to other writers that you never do. And I said, I'm really not planning to make large structural changes from this point. Because if you do that, it apparently just offends the heck out of whatever deity watches over the publication process. Because, beta readers came back and nope, there were changes I clearly had to make. Yeah. So that went out, got to my agent. She and I did 2 complete rewrites. And then I did another really major rewrite for the editor after it was sold. So, yeah, it is my first novel, but it it has gone through a lot.
And I think every novel does. I think, the more I talk to authors and I see the process from behind the scenes, what the readers don't necessarily see unless they get to the acknowledgments and read the acknowledgments, there's a lot of hands on this story by the time it ends up on a bookshelf.
Oh yeah.
And I think it's not just a one person show. So I think that I always find that exciting, that art is a group effort in a sense.
Yeah. Very, very much, certainly, particularly in, I think, traditional publishing, it's a team sport, and I appreciate that aspect of it.
So you touched a little bit about Kira's world, and it's a near future, and it's set in a near future Des Moines. I recognize some of the locations and streets that were mentioned, and so that was fun. You don't find many books set in Iowa, so I always kind of revel a bit when somebody, or even in the Midwest, so I always revel a little bit in that. But obviously the world that Kira and her friend Chloe live in is much darker. Tell us a bit about how the world works and why someone like Kira makes the decision to be a corporate gunslinger for an insurance company like TKC.
Well, Kira, like most people who find their way to that profession, is facing real economic hardship or some other kind of personal hardship. Now, in Kira's case, one of the kind of social innovations that has occurred in Kira's world is that you can pledge 100% of your future income, all the money you will ever make, for in order to get a certain amount of money now. And what happens and that's called a lifetime services contract, and that's really just an extension of ideas that you hear swatted around for extension of credit, and for mortgages used to routinely be 20 years. They've now gone out to 30. They've now gone out to it's gotten harder and harder. It's harder to clear debts by bankruptcy. It's harder to do that kind of thing. And so this is really just kind of a push that idea as far as it can possibly go. And so if she doesn't make her payments, essentially her creditors get to control every aspect of her life. There's some cute legal language to get around the 13th Amendment, but essentially they own you, and you can do. So in order to avoid that, she reaches a point where she needs a bunch of money in a hurry. She has pretty good eye-hand coordination, tests well, and TKC is willing to pay a signing bonus, and that's kind of the hook for her. Is they're going to come from me and take me away for that. But if I can lay hands on this money, I can stop it. Her roommate is more just kind of long-term economic desperation. She's a high school dropout. She can't get any traction in a career. And, she's kind of living with her parents off and on. She realizes, that can't go on. Her siblings, are like having kids and things. And so, and she, really, really wants to be a contributing member of her family. And so she sees that as kind of the vehicle to do this. And, so it's kind of about credit and what lack of economic opportunity can do to you.
And I was struck by how Kira ended up in so much debt, and the fact that I actually listened to that bit again today. That popped up again, and I went to listen to it and read it again, and it's very resonant. I know the book you started in 2013, and when Kira tells her boss Diana and Diana's husband Howard how she ended up in debt, it's very resonant to what college students go through nowadays in terms of acquiring debt to get themselves through college. And also the way Kira's parents passed away. She talks about they were in hospital and they couldn't even hug. They were in an isolation ward. And it just felt very real based on what's happening in the world right now, both on an economical, but on a health level as well.
Yeah, one of those things I really would have liked to be wrong about.
Yeah. I think it was Mike Chen had a book come out earlier this year. That was, I can't remember the title, but it's about a wedding planner during a pandemic, and it came out in January, just weeks before everything shut down. So yeah, it just, and there's, as has been the cry through all of this, I think, from a lot of college graduates that have an amazing amount of college debt, is the cry for college debt to be forgiven, like just wholeheartedly, because it's holding so many people back in terms of achieving what their dreams are, because they're barely making it as it is in the current economic crisis. So. But yeah, wouldn't it be nice? I mean, but that's the beauty of speculative fiction, right? Sometimes it's all about looking ahead and seeing how the world could be or might be in the future. And sometimes it hits a little too on the nose, but those are the points, I think, where you sit up and you listen, at least for me as a reader.
Yeah, I really think of Corporate Gunslinger as being in this kind of long science fictional tradition, going at least to H.G. Wells and the Time Machine, where you essentially just say, this is kind of the track our society seems to be headed on to me, and I'm just going to go down that track a little bit, take a few pictures, bring them back and say, is this where you really want to go?
Yeah. Yeah. Instead of looking back at history and saying we're going to repeat it, we look ahead and see if we're going to repeat it, right? There's actually a great question on Facebook. So I am able to see the questions on Facebook. So
okay, cool.
Cynthia, who's one of our wonderful customers, she asked, do you find yourself returning to certain themes in your different writing projects? And what are those themes you keep coming back to?
Well, I think one of the big things for me is the workplace and what work has become, and particularly what I've started thinking of is the weaponization of virtues. That you take things that are good and necessary and kind of turn them around in a way that they really become a tool of exploitation. I think one of the examples that's kind of in Corporate Gunslinger is this this notion of debt as an honor thing, that, Kira, anytime she's talking about her debts, there's always this, enormous amount of shame attached to it, that, she has not been able to handle it. She has not managed it correctly. And yet you look, I think we saw very clearly during the 08-09 financial crisis, when it was, I think, Morgan Stanley who, had this big, building project, that they were partners in, were not able to complete, and they essentially just turned the keys in and walked away. And yet at that very moment, the bank's financial existence rested on millions of ordinary people not doing that.
Yeah.
But it's like, yeah, for you, it's a you individual, flesh and blood person, it's that's a honor complete at all costs thing. But for me, soulless corporation, that's just a business decision. Yeah.
Or even seeing the bailouts during that time that occurred, and ordinary citizens were upside down on their mortgages because of what the banks had decided to do with those mortgages.
Right.
And you just had to wait it out and hope things got better and you could get assistance. So I want to talk a little bit about the ending without, hopefully we don't spoil it for people. I know that there's an interesting ending. That's what I'm going to say. So what made you choose to end the novel as you did?
Well, there's a bunch of things that went into that decision. And the ending, I think ambiguous, I guess, is maybe a word we can use.
I immediately thought of The Lady and the Tiger, which I read in 10th grade as a sophomore.
And there's a number of things. One is just that trying to build anything definitive off the end of that was either way too long or felt very perfunctory. Probably the biggest single thing, though, the thing that I really want people to do at the end of that book, is sit in judgment of the character and her choices. I think when we talked earlier, I told you when my parents and I went to Normandy and we saw a museum about life in occupied France during World War II. One of the things that has stuck with me is that kind of the thesis of one of the collections was that the reality for most French people during the occupation was that you resist a little bit every day and you collaborate a little bit every day. And I think anytime you're confronted with a really oppressive situation, that's going to be the reality for most people. And I think the thing I want people to think about with Kira is, you know, at what point are you doing just the necessary collaboration to get by? And when does that become really shaking hands with the devil?
Mm-hmm.
When are you really going, you know, all this, you know, the same system that's grinding you up is the one, and you're got your hand on the crank too, you know? And is that where she's at? And does she have real choices? And what does she do with those choices? And really, I think the thing I would like people to say is what to themselves at the end is, what do you think she deserves? And what do you think she should do with whatever the outcome is?
Yeah, and I think that you kind of touch on a little bit too. When Chloe talks about, is it towards the end of the book? She talks about going to church, and then suddenly they're not okay with what she's doing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And she thought up until that point they would be okay with what she's doing, and she fights with her beliefs, as her religious beliefs, and what she needs to do, what she feels she needs to do to bring herself up in the world. And it's a you know, a tough discussion there. And you're right. And Kira always has that shame, and I feel her reasoning for doing what she's doing is completely valid to a certain extent. It's horrible, but because of her MFA and her acting chops, so to speak, she's able to have a unique approach to the citizens she faces in the area, in the dueling ground. So I'll leave it at that. I don't want to spoil it for anybody that hasn't gotten those, because those are some brilliantly written scenes. As someone that's been in the theater, I enjoyed those a lot. And I think the audiobook was fantastic at portraying when Kira was being herself and when she was being, you know, gunslinger Kira. And also the way you played with time, the audiobook, I think, does a really good at showing that shift between Kira's match that you start with and looking back at how she ended up in that match against Niles. So I won't hold the fact that Niles and I share a last name. I won't hold that.
I had noticed that and thought, that really was not deliberate. You know, like I said, when I started on this thing, you know, we had not even met. So. No,
it's okay. Okay.
No, and you know, your point with Chloe is good. You know, I think that Chloe is you know, the thing that I often think about Chloe is 90% Roman Catholic and 100% family solidarity, and being a gunfighter just falls right in that gray zone for her. You know, and that's a very and yeah, it's a tough thing.
Is there? No, this is coming from me because I'm female. So I'm asking, is there a particular reason why you chose female characters? And so many. I love reading books about strong female characters. And I think Diana and Chloe and Kira all are really strong. Is there a reason why you picked women over men?
Well, I think with Kira initially, like I said, it was kind of going through that process of what is the character like this that we've never seen before, you know, that we've never seen before. Like I said, you know, my first jump from my, you know, saturated with media from, you know, practically the womb brain is, well, a retiring gunfighter has to be an old grizzled guy. And so that kind of that pushing was kind of saying, well, what if it's not? And what if it's not? And what if it, you know, and so I finally, like I said, ended up with my woman in her late 20s with an MFA. And as the cast kind of rounds out, having her second also be a woman solved certain kinds of problems, in that if you know, Kira can be kind of impulsive, and she was even more impulsive in earlier drafts. And Diana kind of holds her leash. And if you get into a whole bunch of paternalistic dynamics if Diana is an older man, because you have to constantly fight the idea that you're saying that, well, women are emotional and flighty and, need men to control them, because that's kind of the, whereas on the other hand, if her trainer is also a woman, then it's, well, like, no, that's just a character difference, because Diana is a woman, but with a just very diametrically opposite personality.
Well, she's older. She has more experience. She's a war vet, so.
And she is a war vet, and she's, and she is very domineering. Her approach to her clients is that, look, I have not only gotten you through the ordeal that you're trying to survive, I have gotten more people through it better than anybody else currently practicing. So, shut up and do what I tell you to do.
She's trying to make a living too.
And keep her clients alive, which is kind of the hard part. And,
she
so
had
that
a
was
unique relationship with Kira. I did enjoy the relationship, especially towards the end, when more of Kira's, like, as Kira reveals more of herself and her situation to Diana, and just the way Diana kind of goes maybe a little bit further, or we get to see how Diana does help the people she works with, more than maybe other seconds would. At least that we know of. We know in the context of the story, anyways. Speaking of which, my husband said he wouldn't mind reading more books in the world of Corporate Gunslinger. Any chances there will be other books set in this world? Not necessarily a sequel, but things set in this world.
As with so many things in publishing, it's going to depend on sales. There is actually a proposal that has one character, Diana, as a continuing character, kind of in the world of Corporate Gunslingers, another one of Diana's friends, and that is that basically was told that, well, not comfortable making an offer until we kind of see what happens with sales, and so and there are other books that are floating, that are kind of floating around that I would like to set in, maybe not necessarily the gunfighter portion of that world, but the AI portion I got kind of interested in, but there wasn't really much to do with it in this book. So you just have that little bit of interaction there. But
Diana mentions it a little bit.
Yeah.
She's kind of figured out how to use it to her advantage.
Diana is such that she'll figure out how to use the doorknob to her advantage if you leave her in a room long enough.
Yeah, the scene when Diana's first introduced in the story, I was scared of her, but then I realized what she was doing. Like, I was like, okay, I like this person a lot. So what's up next for you? What are you working on now?
Well, right now I'm working on a novella that is about a woman who basically wakes up in a cabin in the woods with nobody but an AI to talk to, and no memories, no personal memories going back. And the AI has a job for her. And she's not quite sure how she feels about doing it.
Interesting.
And that's as far as I'm going to go with that one.
It might change,
It could.
About how things change and evolve as we write. So here's one of my favorite questions to ask authors. What is one thing you wish people would ask you about? And would you like to share? And what would you like to share about that thing? This could be anything.
Well, one thing I guess about Corporate Gunslinger that is it surprised me that no one has ever pushed back on or mentioned or commented on, and that's that gunfighters have a union. And in fact, it's a pretty good union. You know?
That's right. They do get a steak dinner, don't they?
Well, and they have, a set schedule that, has really, sharply enforced rest periods. And there's times when you're completely off and they can't touch you. And you have, and there's all this stuff around bonuses and things like that, where the Gunfighters Guild and the companies, will kind of get into it as far as what's compensation going to be and this kind of thing. And that was honestly in there just because I needed certain plot elements. I needed rest periods, and I needed, other kinds of things. Like, why are those there? Well, it's rules. Well, whose rules? And so that's kind of where the Gunfighters Guild came from. It was just from the necessity of, I had to have this stuff. And the kind of provisional world building that I had kind of tucked off in the back of my mind, if anybody ever did push back on it and say, we really need to justify this here, would be that it goes back to when the federal laws on gunfighting were passed. And it was just kind of a goofy, the people that were against it recognized that they weren't going to win, but, kind of extracted some concessions going down. And one of those, well, damn it, the gunfighters have to be unionized. So it just kind of arose randomly from the political process. But
that's cool.
But yeah, so it's intrigued me that doesn't seem to have surprised anybody or nobody.
It just made sense to me. I guess you wouldn't want, if you're an insurance company using a corporate gunslinger, or using that method to settle things with your customers, you'd want them to have the best healthcare. You'd want them to be the most well-rested, the best trained, because as the company, hiring them, you're going to make more money that way, sadly. In this world, very sadly, in this case.
That's true of employees generally, though, and companies seem to be really bad at figuring that out.
Yeah. It's true. So is there anybody in the chat, either on Facebook or in the event that we've got hosted, that have questions for Doug, that want to know anything about the book? Let's see if anybody has anything. I don't have any more questions on Facebook. Okay, well, we'll ask my quick fire questions, because I know that when we talked, we did a quick test of this earlier or late last week, just to make sure that we all understood, both of us understood how the system worked. And you had a great memory. I wondered if you could share your memory of going to the bookstore. We talked about that, and what section you gravitated to, and what was your favorite book?
Well, you were talking about, the size of Swamp Fox Books, and I was saying that was so evocative for me, because when I was growing up, my bookstore, the bookstore that I went to was Crossroads, was Walden Books in the Crossroads Mall in Waterloo, Iowa. And I'm not sure what year it stopped being there, but I just really liked the science fiction fantasy section. And it was this, I remember it was a section about as far as I could reach, and a little taller than I was. And that was all the science fiction fantasy that there was in the world, for me, for all practical purposes. If it wasn't there, it didn't exist. And was just, compared to, Amazon now, where, science fiction and fantasy isn't even a good search term. Because,
what specific science fiction and fantasy would you like? Would you like something with dinosaurs or time travel or, dystopian? And it goes even further down. You just there's so many different things you can search for now.
Yeah. And it was a different thing. And favorite book was a really, we were kind of talking about that, and favorite is a really hard thing for me, because, a lot depends on how well you remember things. I've certainly had the experience of going back and reading stuff that, I was really enamored with when I was, 14 or 16 or whatever. Now it's kind of like, ooh, maybe not. but I think certainly the book that has grabbed me, and that, kind of dragged me through it, and I was still thinking about it, still think about it occasionally, was Cameron Hurley's The Light Brigade. And I think a lot of the impact of that one on me arose from the fact that it's part of that long conversation of Starship Troopers and the Forever War and all, those great military science fiction novels and books about why do people fight? Why will they fight in the future? What are their, what are their, what are their motivations and outcomes, and what do they do? And that's just kind of a fascinating subject for me. And I was, and how are those people used? That was that's a very important dimension of the Light Brigade.
What profession other than the one you currently have, or that you've already had, because you had a whole list of things that you've been in your bio, would you like to attempt?
Well, if I could, if we remove all constraints of, age and money and current state of education and everything, I think it'd be very interesting to teach history at the college level. That would be list of cool things to try.
Do you like coffee or tea?
Coffee. Got to be coffee.
Definitely. I'm a coffee person. So I will drink tea, but coffee is my go-to. Yeah. Dogs or cats?
Well, Kathy is allergic to pet dander, so we have neither. But if we, like I said, again, for assuming that we could do anything that we would want to, I would probably have a cat.
So here's a really controversial one. Toilet paper should go over or under on the roll when you put it on?
That one, quite honestly, either I have never thought about it or I have internalized that so deeply that I couldn't even tell you right now which way I go. It's just automatic. So it's one or the other. I'm totally, it's either complete. I'm either completely indifferent to it or I'm totally hardwired. I honestly don't know which.
Do you prefer physical books or electronic books?
Depends on the book. With the exception of references that have really big picture, color, graphic type of components, I think almost any reference is better electronic. Fiction, if it's something that I want to keep or share, almost got to get that thing in the physical form. If you want to do one of those two things, those are kind of the two poles, and everything else just kind of falls in between.
I still prefer the physical book, but a lot of the books that we get at the bookstore, like yours, before it's released, so we can review them, are electronic. So that's where my dividing line comes in.
Ah, okay.
So, and if I'm driving, I love listening to audiobooks.
Audiobooks are cool. I like audiobooks.
How did you have any say, speaking of which, since I love the audiobooks so much, did you have any say in the narrator that they picked?
Yes. Harper sent me a list of narrators and said, and I don't know where the list came from, it came from Harper. And they said, these are the folks that, would be available. And I, went out and listened to their SoundClouds and, caught some samples and looked at what they had done. And I said, it was I remember the comment I made when I returned it. I said, really, this is a really strong field. I think all these people are really good, but Selena Delane was my pick, and was really, really, really impressed with how she came out with what she did with the book. Was just jaw-dropping to me. And I had the next feature on my blog that will go up tomorrow is a little interview with her. And one of the things that she said that just amazed me, because I asked her how she did it, was there are certain scenes in Corporate Gunslinger where you have one character who has been injured and is is in pain, gasping for breath, just kind of on the verge of losing it. And you have the other character out there with them, trying to talk him through the experience, and remaining calm, cool, and collected. And she just goes,
It's amazing.
And I said, do you actually do that, or is that kind of an that you do all one, all the other, and then edit them back together? And she said, nope, it's what you're hearing is what she read.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. And she said, I honestly don't know how to do it. This is just kind of a parlor trick, but wow, what a parlor trick.
That is awesome. That makes me appreciate that scene even more now. See, people have to listen. So if people want to listen to a sample of the book, if they go to Libro.fm, they can listen to a sample there. Libro.fm is the audiobook company that provides money back to independent bookstores like Swamp Fox Bookstore when you make a purchase, or if you set up a membership through them. And Corporate Gunslinger is available on Libro.fm. So I encourage you to go out if you like audiobooks and take a listen and maybe buy the book. It's really amazing on audio.
Oh, and it also was the audio presentation was a finalist for the Society of Voice Actors.
Oh, wow.
Society of Voice Arts and Sciences. There, you can tell why I'm not a member of this. She was a finalist in the science fiction audiobook narration category, and that was pretty cool. But
oh, I just was looking at the chat. Apparently your wife is on the chat, and she says, it's internalized. You always go under, I go over on the toilet paper. So Bill has a question. He says, how do you handle criticism from the general public? Is your writing super personal? Do you even read reviews? I know some authors do and some don't.
Mm-hmm. I read reviews. I like reviews. I guess I don't take them terribly personally. I think, we were talking about the ending. There's some people that really do not like ambiguous endings. And, I guess, my response to that is, fair comment. I mean, if you don't like it and I did it, then, yep, you're not going to like it. and that's really okay. I'm always curious about what people have to say. I don't know that it necessarily informs what I do next or anything. I'm intrigued sometimes by what things that I feel I've really gone in and hammered on something, to be very clear, and find that people, there's some other assumption, something that push people to see that, and that's kind of a head scratcher sometimes, but hasn't been with anything super critical to the story, at least not that I've seen so far. But
I just want to point out too that somebody on Facebook, and I know she's a quilter, Lee, says she loves the quilt behind you.
Well,
so I don't know if there's a story about the quilts.
Well, Kathy is the person who collects quilts in the family, and if you could see our house, so in fact, this room I'm in right now has that quilt, and it's facing another quilt. Across the way in the living room, there's a big quilt. In the entryway, there's a hanging quilt, and in our bedroom, there's a quilt that has been passed down in Kathy's family since I can't remember. I want to say sometime in the 19th century. But,
wow.
But yeah, so no, the quilt stuff is all Kathy. Sorry.
It's beautiful. Well, Kathy, there's a fan in Marion or in Cedar Rapids that loves it. So I do want to let everybody, we did get the amazing book plates that you sent us. And because the weather was so crazy today, I didn't get down to the store to pick them up to show everybody. But Doug got us amazing book plates that have a fox on them that he signed. So if you drop by the store and purchase a copy of Corporate Gunslinger from us, or if you've purchased one already before we got the book plates, we'll get one of those to you. If you buy the audiobook and come in and show us your receipt, or if you buy the ebook and show us your receipt, we'll be happy to give you one as well to hang on to. They are really awesome and amazing. And Ursula and Amanda, just so they know, my co-owners, Doug sent me a link to buy more if we want some specific for the shop to sell. We're always looking for things with foxes and llamas. Or alpacas.
Okay, the foxes I get. What's the deal on the llamas?
So Ursula and Bill, Ursula's the other one of the other co-owners. She and Bill own an alpaca. And Prima, if you do an in-person event when the weather is nice with us, it's possible that the alpaca will come and be there with you. So we have a few. We've done that in the past for Independent Bookstore Day, and some of the authors that appeared early or later than Prima were jealous for the authors that were there when Prima was there. So,
I would be in that category. I would like to see her.
She's really sweet. So.
So does she pack? I mean, do you does she bring books to the store or anything?
Oh, we haven't tried that. We usually put scarves on her, so we'd take pictures with her.
Okay.
Read llama and alpaca stories, which there are quite a few. So it's a lot of fun. We're looking forward for it to be safe to gather in large groups again, because that's one of our favorite things to do, is to bring Prima and do events in person with authors. It's always exciting for us. Okay. Well, so cool. Have you had a chance to see your book on Bookshelves?
Yeah. I think sometime in June, or shortly after it came out anyway, I masked up and I signed a bunch for Beaverdale Books. And then at Barnes, when I went and signed at Barnes & Noble, they were open with distancing and masks and everything. And so I actually got to see it on a bookstore shelf there.
I'm just letting Lee know, because Kathy said that the quilt was made by your grandmother.
Yep.
And Bill says that alpacas aren't good for packing. They're used for their fleece. Llamas are the pack animals, which we have access to those too. We've had a llama make an appearance as well.
Okay.
The things we learned.
The things we learned.
So are there any more questions on Facebook or within the event itself that you want to ask Doug? Is there anything else you want to share with us tonight, Doug?
Mostly just want to say thanks for having me. This was really fun. I hope it was fun for everybody listening in. And, I hope we get to the point where, we can all be vaccinated and open and safely together in the not terribly distant future, because I would like to see everybody again.
Yes, it would be good to see you in person again. So thank you for your time. We look forward to hearing about the next book. Maybe we'll be able to meet in person for that one.
That would be
do a big
cool.
signing here in Cedar Rapids and Marion area. So thank you for your time tonight, Doug. You can rewatch this. Will be on Facebook once it finishes processing, so you can watch it anytime. So we appreciate your time, and we'll see you soon, Doug.
All right. Thanks, everybody, for having me, and thanks, everybody, for coming.